away from this.
All
Meet my
right.
piece.
Hi, this is Steve Hodgdon of Modern Asset Management. Today is July 22nd, 2020. And tonight I'm going to talk about building a team for remote investing. This has been something that's come up a lot. I've had very good success in Pensacola, done, I think, 8 projects there now, and we're starting our 9th. And we're going to start in earnest in Northwest Indiana, building a rental pool, and that's what's coming up next.
Hello.
So the first thing I'm going to do is um, I'm going to mute Eric. I'm going to mute John. I'm going to see.
Just one moment, just for the
Sir?
record.
Yes. Oh,
Apparently,
okay.
only one of us can record. So you're
Oh,
recording.
I am recording. All right.
Yeah.
With me is Dion DePelli with Prime Real Estate in Crown Point, Indiana.
Premier.
Premier, sorry. Thank you. Keep me on track. Dion and I have been doing transactions together. I think we're through the 4th year now. We started with buying a pool of performing mortgages from a hedge fund. We purchased 26 low balance um, loan modifications that had all been performing for several years. They were created out of the last crash. Like I said, we bought 26 mortgages in 12 states. We still have 14 of those performing. We've sold some have paid off, a couple have gone to foreclosure and bankruptcy. And we're migrating back towards real estate as opposed to exclusively in notes, because I have a day job that's all about lending money and I need to stop working so blessed hard. So tonight it's talking about building a team. What's in it for me is I just turned 64 and suddenly had one of those ideas that I can't keep running this hard forever. So we're going to take another run at kind of a semi-retirement passive income strategy. And so that's going to be part of tonight. So tonight is primarily about how to build a team that you can trust out of area. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to show the project that I just lent on here. So you see my screen?
Yep.
All right. These are 2 cameras sitting on a project in Pensacola, Florida, that's being run by Sunrise Acquisition Services. We talked about this a few weeks ago. Sunrise purchased an acre or so that had 4 mobile homes on it, a little dinky rundown spot. They moved out the mobile homes. They rezoned. They got the property replatted into 4 individual lots, and they're in the process of building houses. This is a little app that they use called Arlo, which lets them look at their project whenever they want to. And you can see in the picture on the left, the sun is setting in Pensacola. And this, they were showing me, was the pad that I helped pay for today. So they built a new pad, and we're doing a SIPS construction, a structured integrated panel system. And we're told those panels are on the way. And this is the house that's I don't know, 3 weeks ahead of it in the plan. This was a simple straight loan. I had some money sitting in a self-directed IRA that I wanted to put to work while I was trying to reorganize my I don't know, my midlife crisis, my 2/3 life crisis, my 7/8 life crisis. I don't know. And so we did a deal here that was 8% interest and 2 points, and its term runs less than a year. And this is, I think, one of the things that we're going to promote and help people do later. There's lots of people that are looking to buy notes. Notes tend to have real long term. We have no idea what's happening with the current state of the world. But I'm pretty confident that a year from now, all these houses will be sold and I'll be paid back. So I put out $80,000, and I'll get back $88,000 without having to worry about it. And again, I think
Steve,
that, yeah, yep.
so how big was that parcel of land, the original?
Let's get a real number. Hang on. I don't know exactly. Let's. Eric, you want to just jump in and tell us what that is?
It was 200 by 150. A little less than an acre.
I mean, thanks for, we got to do math, Eric? Come on.
That's it. That's 30,000 square feet. An acre is 40,000. Was it 42,576 or something?
Yeah, 43,560. So, so we got we got about whatever 3/4 of an acre thereabouts. So what do you subdivided it into two lots? It was a 2-lot subdivision. Is that what that is?
It was 4 trailers sitting on one parcel that had initially been 4 lots. So we went to the county and had it reverted back to its original designation, which was 4 lots, and now it's 4 separate parcels. 4 lots.
Oh, so you got 4 separate lots. 4 out of really? Wow. Okay. That's 30,000 square. Yeah, that's only 30,000 square feet. Is that right?
That's correct.
No.
Those are tiny
Now,
lots. Okay.
there's 450 by 150 lots now.
Okay. Skinny homes. Okay.
So entry level housing priced south of $200,000, accessible and affordable, and it sits in a part of the community that is just blue collar, and it's gonna, and I think it's the right play. The last deal that I had done was I had just finished a foreclosure fight on an $8 million mansion project in LA, and so I was really enticed with something small and affordable. Let's get back to what we're trying to do here. So here's an example of I'm 3,500 miles away, and I can check on it, such as that matters. But I know stuff's going on. Whereas a lot of pieces went into this ahead of time. There was a thorough budget that we wrestled about to make sure that it was real. We have an accurate experience based price per square foot for construction. And again, we had everything teed up. All the plans were done. Everything was ready. The contractor was ready, and all we needed to do was fund some mezzanine financing. The builder loan came in, and they're off and running. We did our very first project we did 3 years ago. We hit it out of the park in terms of timing. From buying the lot to selling the house, it was 5 months. If there's anybody on the call in California, you know that you can't get anything started for a year here in California. In Florida, you can go to the counter, talk to the planner, and walk out in 2 weeks with permits. So it's just a different world. And of course, the rent multiple is so much better if you're going to build these for rentals. And these would make great little rentals. So let's get on to the topic at hand, because I tend to babble. Tonight it is how to build a team out of town. So I'm going to get rid of this share, and we're going to bring Dion back in, and let's start a dialogue. So Dion and I have been talking. We talk a lot, but we were talking specifically about here's Steve pivoting one more time, and how do we put this together? So where do you want to take us? You want me to keep talking, or you got 2 cents to throw in here?
I'm not gonna lie, I was just trying to swallow my pizza.
You're still eating pizza? It's 8:00 at night. You're allowed to have dinner.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Look, so a segue to that, I think it's interesting, right? And it's ironically we stumbled into it. because I don't think a lot of people talk about this. You know, you're a long distance investor, and you know, what are the things that you need to go, you know, check off, obtain, you know, what are the relationships, you know, how do you protect your capital exposure for you know, for, I mean, they're not really counterparties, they're, you know, vendor relationships that you may or may not necessarily be, you know, familiar with. And I know when you know, when I was at the investment fund, this was a big burn, you know, when in the recession, you know, we got taken advantage of all the time. And it probably, you know, more than likely it still happens, right? You know, I can't say that we do it, and you like to think that everybody operates in a, you know, a good manner, but certainly there, and maybe it's not even that people are trying to necessarily take advantage, but it's difficult to quantify the skill set and capacity of folks, and so thereby you kind of, you know, deliver some you know, some belief in some folks that you hook up with, and you know, that may or may not be turn out right, and we hear about the success stories and we don't hear enough about the bad stories. So I think this is a relevant conversation that we kind of, Steve and I stumbled in, and this was because you and I are trying to figure it out.
Yeah, and that's what makes this conversation. So
yeah.
I
So I got one bite of pizza. I'm gonna turn my photo back on.
Right.
But
You
if I
eat
eat
your
my
pizza.
I'm gonna.
So an example. So you're trying to mitigate risk, and the primary risk is if you've done a good job selecting the asset, you actually know what you're trying to accomplish. And you pick the right partners and boots on the ground, then you reduce that risk. The biggest risk is time. So I had financed 3 projects in Gulf Breeze with one builder, and he was knocking them out. He was doing great. And then a couple of things happened. He got distracted, decided we were building another house, and he got distracted, and he was going to build the same comparable house at the same time. And he put all of his time and attention into that property instead of mine. And at the same time that happened, a hurricane came through and wiped out Panama City. So all the tradespeople in Pensacola ran to Panama City because it was twice or half again the going rate for labor. So I lost my trusted partners because they lost their vendor, they lost their workers, and that project just took 9 months. It took 9 months to build. And that cost me 9 months at I don't know, 9% or 8.5% interest with the builder, with the building financing, and and I came out okay. He didn't make any profit. We ran that project took 1.5 years or longer, maybe 2 years, and it was done. So keeping relationship is important, and I backed away from that too much. I should have stayed on it more, and there's not a chance that Dion gets away from me. you know but if you're going to manage this new model, and so you look at, I mean, this isn't anything different that Memphis Invest is doing, or anybody that's selling turnkey, except we're going to structure financing differently for different people that have different who have different goals. But you're only as good as your general contractor, who's only as good as the subs, who's only as good as the market there. But you can shorten time by really knowing what's going on.
If I can add to that, I think, one of the caveats to our discussion as we are kind of going through this is, the the away investor tends to relinquish control for whatever reason, right? for a presumption of expertise, a presumption of execution, you know, professionalism, et cetera, you know, for whatever reason. And look, I think we've all, a lot of long distance investors have, you know, suffered from this. I know, you know, I've done the same thing, where you're just like, hey, yeah, you know, I believe you, you know, please do that. And without communicating well, or, you know, even with getting a, you know, a good scope of work, I did all the right things. I had the contractor deliver back a professional scope of work, and I reviewed that scope of work, and man, it looks good, and it's, you know, inches here and millimeters there, and, you know, we're doing this drain tile and yada yada yada. The problem is, you know, somewhere between that point and final delivery, it's not what you bargained for. And it's probably important to point out that this same dichotomy happens in a local market where a property owner is there, right? I mean, we all know that horror story. You know, we all have a neighbor, friend, or whatever, and, you know, they hired somebody to do bathroom work, kitchen work, blah blah blah, and it didn't work out. So so it's extremely important to kind of figure this team out. And I think one of the things that, Steve, you and I were coming to the realization of was, okay, so you got to have somebody who thinks the way that you do as an investor, because the vendor of services, if you will. So let's just consider, you know, the contractor and their subs and all of that, and, you know, and all of their glory. They're a vendor. They're delivering a service. They're doing what they need to do, but there isn't necessarily. It's problematic when you don't have a ongoing subscribed relationship, right? And you've talked about this numerous times, right? You know, if you're spread out into multiple markets, you don't have a good relationship with anybody. Real estate agents, title people, contractors, you know, the list goes on. So, you know, what you're looking to do is develop that relationship with somebody. But the next problem that you run into is, do they think like you, right? And that's what you and I were talking about earlier today, is do the vendors that you know that we engage think like, you know, asset managers or asset traders or investors, or, you know, are they on this side of the capital curtain in regards, and the answer, and not to belittle them, but the real answer is no, they're not. Right. They're there to do what they think is what they're supposed to do and earn their wage, right? And so then, you know, so the question that you and I were developing was, you know, how do we manage that better? And you know, it seems to be that the real answer to that is, you got to get somebody who thinks like you as an investor, that interfaces with them locally, that does work inspection. And this is, you know, and I kind of point this out, this is an interesting idea, but it's, you know, it's not like wacky. If you were to build a new house through a construction escrow, right, you would put, if you paid all cash, or even if you use a lender, you'd put your money into a construction escrow, and there would be draws, and those draws would be milestone by specific points of work. And the lender, because you as a private investor probably wouldn't structure a proper, you know, drawdown escrow, but the lender knows how to do that, and the lender knows how to send somebody out, inspect, deliver back a report, read that report. Is the work done? If it is, then you get the next draw. If it isn't, then, hey, Mr. You know, Mr. Contractor, Mr. Builder, then you need to, you know, you got some work to do, right? And I don't think a lot of investors do that. I don't think a lot of investors approach it in that manner. So what you and I are trying to figure out is, well, how do we develop a better system like that? And you know, if you got, you know, you're whatever 2,700 miles away, and you know, I'll just say it out loud. You know, one of the things I said in our conversation was, you know, obviously I can't subcontract myself out, right? For the benefit of you, for the benefit of another investor, the benefit of what we're trying to do, it doesn't make sense for me locally or afar to subcontract myself out. I certainly couldn't do that from afar. So being local, like we were talking about some, you know, development opportunities and, you know, in Gary in Northwest Indiana, where I'm at, and I'm local, and I can go drive there and kick them and so on and so forth. And I know the vendors, right? Problem is, there was you know, good managers and early in my youth taught me an interesting slang, which, you know, you got to inspect what you expect, right? So if you can't inspect it, then you have to have the next best inspector who thinks like you inspect it, right? And you've got to have that brutal brand of honesty where, hey, I shouldn't be afraid to tell you, no, this is, you know, this is messed up and this is going to be a problem. You know, we opened up this wall and sorry, there's a bigger bill here. You know, and I think somewhere in the middle of all of that is where rehabs go wrong, right? And especially long distance rehabs, because, you know, if I had a contractor that was a long way away and they gave me a, you know, rehab budget of 10 grand, and you know, they opened up a wall and all of a sudden we've got, you know, whatever, pick any series of issues, but, you know, bad pipes, whatever, and, you know, there's going to be a substantial capital increase. There's a chance that they're going to try to protect the relationship and not convey the, you know, that reality.
Yeah.
And the reality is, you're the investor who took the risk, and you've got to, you know, it's got to be put on the table. You've got to be able to deal with it. It also means that, you know, you've got to rely on your team that can look at a problem and say, hey, you know, we got a bad bathtub, doesn't mean we burn the house down, you know, right?
Right. So I think the first thing is making sure that you and I are aligned, incentivized financially as close to the same way as possible. So I told you today, and I've been saying for a while, I want to buy 10 houses in Gary.
Yeah.
Didn't say I wanted to keep them all, but I wanted to buy 10 houses in Gary. And we looked at some, and we came down and helped refine what I meant by that. And what I really meant by that is 3-bed, 1 or 2 bath with a garage, built after 1950 in neighborhoods that aren't completely decimated. So I you know, give me 5 in a 3-block radius, something like that, where I've got same uniformity. I talked about. We both said that we'd want to set, so you've got a purchase price. So that's first task is you get paid to acquire the assets that match the goal, and make sure that we agree that that this is the right goal. The next is there's the piece. So the play is to buy at a discount, supply the force appreciation by improving the property, and then which requires more money, and then tenanting, and either keeping or selling as a turnkey rental, or selling at any one of those stops along the way. So if you're paid on the buy and you're paid on the sell, I would then say to you, well, how about you keep your sell commission in the deal? How about you come away owning 10% of each one of these, right? So, you know, something like that. And so that, so that we're both tied to getting to the finish line, whatever one of those finish lines are, right? If we decide that buying a bulk of units at once gets a lower value and there's some margin there for the next investor, then maybe we look at that point bringing in partners or selling those outright. But the next step is, if you buy a property for $25,000 and you need another $25,000 in an escrow fund to rehab that house, you, the guy at the other end, needs that money from the investor up front. Either you need it as a draw from a line of credit, or you need that cash in hand so that you don't have to go chasing back for 5,000 here and 2,000 there, and oh my goodness, we had an overrun, I need another 300, all that. You want that piece done, and I think that piece is an investable return for people that are looking for short-term, reasonable yield with decent downside protection. So you could sell, I would think that would be an 8% coupon, 1-year note. So
I think there's a lot of things that we probably take for granted when we talk, right? Because it's a little bit, we're a little bit more used to, some of these things, right? Lending against risk, understanding, flushing that risk out and understanding what that risk is. And, you and I both have had conversations with, private investors who have come back to the table and have had some pretty, unfortunate horror stories, or predicaments where they're trying to recover capital that they lent out.
Mm-hmm.
And it comes back to, a lot of that comes back to not having a good, plan for the capital, not having a good manager for the capital on the project that functions as liaison to the vendors that, produce the output of work. And, when I say that, it sounds so, revolutionarily simple, but, the more I think about that as you were talking, I field a lot of investor phone calls that, John Jones had $100,000 and he gave, Billy Ray, $100,000 to do this rehab project, and he didn't, and Billy Ray was like, yeah, the budget's $30,000. And John Jones didn't even understand that $30,000 wasn't going to repair that house to begin with. Mm-hmm. And so, and I think that's, and you and I talked about that in relationship to some of the, look, we all have our familiar relationships that we have in our local markets, and there tends to be this, I always call it the race to zero, right? And I don't really know a better way to describe it. And it's so very unfortunate, but it literally is the race to zero by an investor to spend the least amount of money to improve something, to potentially make the most amount of, rent or gain. And it's so counterintuitive. You and I have spent some time, and, ironically, you started off with some of the SIPS paneling projects, and, I'm a huge advocate for some of the SIPS projects we're doing here in Northwest Indiana, and, the avocation of that, if that's even the right word, is that we don't build disposable products, right? But it doesn't seem that the mentality of investors is improve to a point where I diminish my ongoing, repair and maintenance over the next period of time. So look, if you are a consumer and you go out and buy a new, whatever, GE washing machine, you'd be pretty, amiss if that washing machine broke in 12, 24, 36, maybe even 60 months, right? In today's technological world. But it seems like, when we talk about some of this lower tier investment stuff, we're not talking luxury, right? So we're talking sub-luxury, just, kind of for the record. That there's this race to the bottom of, well, I can put this in and it works.
Mm-hmm.
But is that the craftsmanship and is that the quality that you really want in there? And, and a lot of times we hear this is, I can't see it from my house. It's not my, it's not my investment.
But the value in an investment like this is always the net operating income. And you have to build something that somebody's going to move into and stay.
Right. Well,
right? So it's got to be nicer than the neighbor's house.
Against, look, residential real estate rarely has a deferred maintenance budget built in, right? Very rarely, right? It's not commercial real estate. So, and yeah, long-term tenancy is what you want. You don't want turnover because turnover means more capital expenditures. And a lot of people don't think that way. Unfortunately, I think when you get into, some of these places, look, I'll use Gary as an example, Detroit, whatever, that lower bandwidth stuff. There's a race to zero.
Yes.
To spend the least amount of money.
Yep.
And they do that with the presumption that I can't get a better tenant, or I can't get a better buyer, or I can't get a better value. And that's probably self-defeating before you start, right? Mm-hmm. It's probably the wrong way to look at that. It's certainly not to build it and they will come. And then you have to ask yourself, why are you there then? Are you really doing good math? Are you really, more often than not, I think you could probably echo this. When you talk to those investors, the real math for what they're doing isn't accurate. You're actually losing money. I mean, that much deferred maintenance, if you've got, massive turnover costs annually or God forbid, less than annually, mm-hmm. Holy smokes. You're not that mid double digit return that you thought you were making is so far off. You're just lying to yourself, mm-hmm. right? So there's something to be said about doing it and doing it right? There's something to be said about and and I've said this before. Don't get married to the asset, get married to the return. But that's an oversimplification for not caring about the asset that you're putting your money into, right? It's still your money. You should still have some level of concern, and you should have some level of concern for the improvements that you put in. And I think and I could probably make the argument that in today's day and age, those improvements are there's such a gap between improvements, and I argue this, and we won't get too far into it because it'll be a whole rabbit hole. But technologically speaking, a home that I can deploy technological improvements into a home today that far outweigh a home 5 years ago, let alone 10 years ago. Just think of a window, right? Just a window. The windows that we produce commonly today are so energy efficient in comparison to the windows 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and holy smokes, go look at 20 years ago. And that technological, that probably follows Moore's curve. And and that's the race to zero that I tend to talk about. It's like, why not just put the better window in once and for all? Like once and for all, just put the right window in. And if you plan for it to be the right way, then you only make the right investment. It seems like the other way to do that is I bought the property because I became attracted to it, and I sacrificed proper improvements to, recapture my idea of gain.
Mhm.
And so who learned the lesson? And so then, the lesson, you kick the can down the road. You eventually learn that lesson because you just don't realize it immediately. So, I bought the house, I paid too much, the improvements were more than I budgeted, so I didn't do the quality of improvements that I thought. And subsequently, I hurt myself in the long run. You don't hear that story being talked about enough. And I think that's, at its core, I think that's a lot of what you and I were talking about is because we've experienced that. Right?
Yeah.
We've experienced that, we've both made that mistake. And through capital deployment or through vendor management or bad decisions, right? It's nobody else's fault. I'm not blaming the vendor, right?
Mhm.
But either way, what you do is you kick the can down the road, and eventually you catch up to the can, and you're like, yeah, well, here's the loss. You just didn't want to realize it at the right time. You didn't want to solve the problem at the right time, and that's, I think, what we're trying to talk about mitigating. And how do you mitigate that? And the solution to that is how do you find somebody who cares about your money as much as you? And the answer to that, and I've always said this, and I'll let you chime in after that, is nobody cares more about your money than you. It's your money, and nobody should.
That's right.
Right? But are you caring about your money? Like, would you go out and buy your own, would you go buy we'd go buy a GE washing machine from a swap meet in whatever, pick a bad place, right? Or would you go to, Best Buy or some notable place and buy the right washing machine? You didn't get the latest, greatest GE washing machine for some substantial discount. If you came and told me that you got the latest, greatest GE dishwasher for, 25% of market value, I'm probably going to look at you like you probably didn't.
In the crash, 2008, 2010, I was running this property management business in Palm Springs. And so I had a couple of hundred units and a couple of hundred owners. And the owners covered this whole bandwidth. Some of them had no money at all. They were, they were losing their own house in foreclosure. The world was coming to an end. It was nuts. And we'd have a refrigerator fail in a rental, and I'm buying them at the secondhand refrigerator store because that's what that client just trying to get to the next day. But we got really good at buying. We'd be buying stuff at Habitat for Humanity. I mean, just doing that because we had a lot of lower end inventory. But you don't have, you're going to buy a GE washer. I'm really happy going to I used to go to the Sears outlet and buy a scratch and dent. And so now you go to the back corner of Best Buy and you buy a scratch and dent there. It's, it's going into the apartment. As long as it doesn't, it's not destroyed, it's just fine. Right? It's just fine. You don't have to. One of the other ends of it is if you take guys like me in California, and we have California pricing in our head when we go to Northwest Indiana, and we're putting in granite counters and tile floors and Berber carpets and all. And like, no. There's something that you have to know your market. You have to know what your tenant is used to seeing, and then give them just one step up on the one half step up on the flooring, counters in nice colors, fake stainless appliances, just to make them feel when they walk in that hey, they got some value.
Well, look, the best thing that ever happened was 3M came out with Traffic Masters, which completely shot the marketplace for linoleum flooring, right? I mean, so investors were like, wow, I can put this in and they can't break it or tarnish it or whatever. And but there's a lesson in there that it was still more expensive than linoleum.
Right.
But it probably
but it's one
it'd be
time.
interesting. Yeah, it was it'd be interesting to go back and see what the, the learning curve was for time when, introduced technology versus deployed technology,
Mhm.
in that flooring kind of
Yeah.
piece where people said, hey, that's what I should put in. And I think that's kind of what we're talking about. And going back to, look, again, nobody cares about your money more than you, right? And you said something, and I'll bring it up earlier. And you said, there's a difference between the collectors and the investors, right? And there's a different mindset. And I think, in today's day and age where a lot of investors are trying to, run a lot of those gaps, and not that you and I are experts at spanning that, chasm of, differential, because it's huge, right? I don't necessarily relate to, some of the difficulties or opportunities that collectors have. When we talk about loans, I advocate using a loan collector, and I pick on my account manager. I don't get on the phone with the borrower. When we talk about, renters, I don't talk to the tenant. I talk to the property manager, because you want to hold somebody accountable. And one of, I think, the key attributes of identifying who that person is that intermediary, if you will, needs to have a understanding of the capital side. Dollars aren't free. And this is, if, just to carry that one step further and tie in, all the asset classes that we talk about, the biggest complaint for full service servicing was always, for mortgage service, was always, servicers would just go out and, randomly charge you for things, right? All of a sudden you got a $50,000 asset in Gary, and you got, the lawn was mowed, once a week for $100, right? And that doesn't make sense. And what did that servicer care? It's not their asset, because it's not their money, and they're just going to charge you, and you're going to have to pay it. And that eventually eroded into this, gone too far idea of, well, I'm an investor and I can micromanage all of this stuff. And I think the answer to that is you're lying to yourself, and you can't. And so to bring that full circle back, here we are, we're talking about, what's the identity of good team members. And, and maybe that looks like having, identifying where the asset is locally, identifying who the team members are locally, the vendors and the team members, and then figuring out who's going to be that liaison between, local vendors, property management, contractors, tenancy, and you as an investor. And if you're not a full-time investor, I think we've diminished the value of what it means to actually be, I think we take for granted what passive investing is and what active investing is. And, I do this full time. I don't have a day job. I don't go punch a clock somewhere. But if you have a day job, there's no way you're keeping up with this. It's not happening. It's impractical to think that you can. And I have clients that think that they can, and what it ends up looking like is they touch that asset file once a month, maybe, and and then all of a sudden you're 6 months down the line, you got a blown budget, you got too much capital in, and you're not recovering enough, and you screwed up the entire idea of whatever you thought your return was going to be, right? Some of that is where you and I started our relationship.
Yeah. That's exactly where we started. So let's take the piece. Let's put together the team. Having been a property manager, I think I know a thing or two, but it doesn't matter. I know a thing or two about everything, right? Um, so the matching the property manager to the asset class is really important. Um, I ran this bottom end property. I bought this bottom end property management business. Terrible, terrible. That's like episodes I can do on that. But what that business had is that business had people that just didn't care about the tenants. They were marking time. They knew the end of the world, and they just didn't care.
Yeah.
The shopping center I owned ran great until I changed property managers because she had to leave because of a health problem. I went to a new company, and the company that I chose in Denver was the highfalutin downtown folks, and I had a suburban BC strip center. And so every time somebody walked on property, they punched a $150 ticket.
Yeah.
And
Jeez.
we
Like
had
hot price.
tenants that never saw the property manager. They had no idea who she was. And that was part of the reason that I sold that asset. Is I was worn out.
Yeah.
So you match. You don't take an inner city um, Section 8 property manager and give them a high rise to manage. You don't, and vice versa. You don't take somebody who's used to managing shopping malls and say, now we're going to manage entry level rentals, right?
Well, you know, the more I think about it, there's a lot of similar echoes in the way that we can talk about real property investing with the way that, I've always picked on whole loan investors, right? The interesting contrast there is I always think that whole loan investors it's easier to point out the absurdity, right? I have a mortgage, therefore I know about loans. No, you don't. You have one. I bought one. Right. Okay. So
You
there's
talking to
50.
me?
Yeah, well, there's 50 states, 50 separate sets, state laws. There's foreclosure and bankruptcy that things imply. There's so many more moving pieces to that, and it's interesting. I think you brought it up. I think it was one of your good analogies in one of our conversations where, look, you know how to use your iPhone, but you don't know how to make it. So, I think as investors, we do a poor job of, identifying when we should go build a team, right? And so step one is realize that you need to go build a team, right? Step two is who should be on my team. And, and some of the things that you and I talked about, we talked about, I've got an excellent general contractor that's here. We've got two groups of laborers, if you will, a laboring group. Then there's the work that needs required permitting, right? And then there's property management. So there's a lot of pieces that you have to go back and put together, and they may not all be in your best interest. Property management may look at a property and say, hey, I'm going to raise to zero because I want my cap rate to be high. And you may look at, the property manager in response and say, look, I don't want to be replacing that washing machine every 3 years. Go get a new washing machine. And so I think that there's a difference between the correct conversation and the comfortable conversation. And I think what happens a lot is investors get persuaded into a comfortable conversation because you don't know, you're new. This is, hey, I'm here, I've got one, I've got two, I've got five. You compared to a property manager, they've got 50. What do you know? What do you know compared to the X amount of loans that I've traded? You don't know. What if I'm just completely wrong? So somewhere there's an advocacy for common sense here, but there's also an advocacy for it's your money. You wouldn't buy that for yourself. Spend the right money. Don't race to zero. and then find the right people that you can rely on to manage it from you, hold someone accountable, and let that person, professionally manage the downstream, right? It's just like any other, sort of business that's out there. There's a logistics of downstream management that that you probably need to empower. And I'm, for all the, agents and managers out there, I'm just going to tell all you folks at home, we don't work for free. Right? So, if you want me to go manage your, look, recently we did a quote for an investor that was out of town for a rehab project in Gary, and he had purchased a property at relatively cheap. And we put together what I thought was a very, very good and reasonable budget to almost rehab an entire home, about a 1,600 square foot home. Let's just say it was, 20 grand. It's a little more than that, but it was a little 20 grand. Well, for us to do that, we're still putting, look, I have to keep my lights on, and I have to be incentivized to be able to go to the property and look at that and, deal with the problems that come up. At the same point in time, and this is a lower value home. At the same point in time, when we contracted some of the MEPs, some of the, mechanical, electrical, plumbing systems that are in the property, I'm not an advocate for trying to diminish that. Put the right HVAC in, put the right plumbing in, because if you don't, tomorrow it's going to be an issue, and then I'm a jerk, right? Or the vendor's a jerk because you wanted to cut a corner because of capital, or so where does the standard get set, and how do you set that standard? Well, the answer is the standard should get set from the investor, and then you should put that forward as an investor. Even if you're an active investor, you're not in this full time. So you need to find somebody who is, that can uphold the standard of execution and quality that you need to protect your investment, right? You don't go to the AT&T store and buy a used phone and expect a warranty, do you?
Right. So we're coming up on an hour, so let's try to put the pieces together about what
That wasn't
we're
it.
trying
That
to
wasn't a good summary. I thought it just.
yeah, well, but that's and it is, but it's the pieces.
I was watching the clock. I was trying.
Good. It's the property manager, right? So it's the property manager, it's the contractor, understanding the subs, the scope, the general scope of work about what you're trying to do. And this is
Right.
and it's not, I want to buy cheap and I want to sell high. That's not that may be the result, but it's all the pieces. So it's the instructions to you the broker, is we're looking for this type of asset class and these sections of geography, and we're looking to drive to this rent multiple.
Yeah, it's a little bit of the age old, you don't know what you don't know. And the next unfortunate part of that, and I'm in a lot of real property, and I'm in a lot of real estate asset groups, but and you see it all the time. If you're a landlord, you're probably in a Facebook group, and people are probably asking, how do I refinish my tub? How do I redo this? And I get it, but I'll just point out, like, refinishing tubs, I'm just like, just go get a new tub. Like, literally, by the time you spend your time researching this online, you could have replaced that tub for a couple $100. If you really knew what you were doing, you have it done. And it just seems, and I don't diminish the recycling of stuff, but I have a problem, and as I always have, with not knowing what you don't know and getting your information from the wrong source, right?
Like the internet.
Like the internet.
Yeah. So we see that, you see that a lot with people that are chasing high yields by thinking they can work defaulted seconds. And what's missing in that is there's no calculation for the amount of hours and time and effort that it takes to get a defaulted second paying again. And
Airplane
all,
crash.
yeah, right. But if that's what you want to do, if that's what you want to do, then go buy your next door neighbor's house and be a handyman. I had a, I had a property management business in a rural part of California for a little while, and I found this guy who had 26 houses, and he was looking to sell because he was probably my age now. This was a while back, and he had this outfitted minivan that looked like you'd walk into an Ace Hardware store, and that's what he did all day long as he went around wrenching on his 26 properties.
Yeah.
And the idea of cashing all that out for half the income, I was going to flat half the income you're getting now, because we're going to have to pay to do all this work. He couldn't bring himself to do it, and he was just going to work himself to death. He was going to work till the day he died, and that's great. That's great. And there's a whole model to do that in your town, but you can't do that from 2,000 miles away.
No. We can make the argument you can't do that, in your own town, right? You're more than likely. So, to clean up, to run the iteration of clean up there again, what we're advocating is, find the team, what does the team consist of? The team, to do this on a repetitive scale, the team requires licensure, right? So you need a contractor with licensing. They need subcontractors with licensing and know-how. You need knowledge of the market. Obviously you don't want to over improve things, but you don't want to under improve things either. We've got a group of folks that do some, both on our property management side and sort of ad hoc. And a lot of the work that they do is per task is priced out. To change a light fan is, X amount of dollars. You're not going to know what that is, in your first investment, or maybe even through your first 20 investments. Who knows, right? So you need to find that team that has that sort of structure in place. And then, I think the next important thing is having that, having a liaison a little bit that can help you, bridge that gap to thinking like an investor, right? You and I, we have these conversations because we think and talk about being an investor and how investments work. We're not here talking about how to repair a toilet, because I have no idea. I mean, I do, but I don't. But I know enough to hold a general contractor responsible to fix a toilet. And that may sound oversimplified, but it probably isn't, and there's where the slippery slope is. And that's why you got to have that team segmented with, that compartmentalization. You want a property manager who deals with tenants, who understands, the local tenancy, market rates, customs that are local. You want contractors that are local. You want a general contractor that you can, rely on, that's going to pull, God forbid you do improvements that don't get permitted. Holy smokes. I've bought loans with unpermitted improvements. They're not pretty. And then you want somebody on your team that where you're not the only person that you're talking to about what you're doing from an investment strategy, and that you and I get along so well because we can do that. We can talk about, does this dollar make this sense? And sometimes the conversation becomes no. And, I think those are the, if you're going to build a team far away, I know when, look, when I was running the fund, I got taken advantage of all the time, hand over fist, by real estate agents who were linked up with contractors, by contractors who took advantage of real estate agents, because you just can't know. And I pick up clients that are taking it, you and I both talk to clients all the time that are taken advantage of by the same colossal mistake. So you know, you got to go find somebody that you can do repetitive business. You've been an advocate of that. You know, stop trying to do business everywhere and start trying to do business somewhere. And that allows you to build that team or find that team to rely on. You know, that's the secret sauce. You know, from there you can build up, but it's really tough when you're a one-off investor, right? You know, you're fine. You go put $1 million out in Gary, and you know, you'll develop a team. But if you're a one-off investor, you need to go find somebody who's got some, you know, repetition that far exceeds the one that you're going to do, you know, for the next 3 years. Because that way they can help you when you come back, you know, 3.5 years from now. And you know, maybe then you do 2. Now you got 3, right? And I think we overlook that. I think oftentimes we overlook that.
Yeah. So the inflection points where there's value added or money to be made is buying right. And again, local knowledge is the only solution to that. Unless you're just buying so grossly low tax deeds, that kind of thing, where you're just going to buy 50 and, you know, hope 30 of them are okay and you throw the rest away. It's the bringing product, the effort to bring product to market that is attractive and satisfies the financial goal. And there's a inflection point there that now you've got a rent ready product that you can sell. You can sell after, you know, somewhere in the middle of the work being done. There's all different points along there. There's a decision to sell or keep after tenanting. And then there's, you know, then you deal with the structure of the people that are the investors in the group of, do they need to hold for long-term capital gains? How, you know, what's the overall effort, end goal? And that's trying to begin with the end in mind. And that's a big failing of me of late, where I'm just, you know, I've been just firing at this and firing at that and seeing how things work. And, you know, after having playing that way for, you know, last 4 or 5 years, I think I know, I've been through enough things that I think I know what I want to do. I want to do cookie cutter, repeatable. I don't need to hit home runs. You know, let's go hit doubles. If we ever play baseball again, let's go hit doubles, and just be content that we have a machine that turns this over again and again, that the contractor's happy, the guys working for the contractor are happy, the tenants are happy, the property manager's happy because he doesn't have to do much. You bring a product to market, you know, on both ends, and the buy and the sell that's attractive and doesn't sit on market for, you know, 6 months or a year. So it's, so where do we go? We go to stale listings in the MLS. We go to expired listings. We go to whoever it is we know and say, how do we go find 10 doors to start with?
We pause there for a second?
Yeah.
I know we're running out of time, but so I hate that. I flippin' hate the 8th grade girlfriend conversation about the quality of an asset. I can't stand it with the life of me. Right? I don't care. You know, the solicitation of an asset is so if a seller fails to solicit an asset broadly, then they're not going to achieve market value, right? And so, you know, that seems to be the battle cry of investors. You know, that was the Carlton Sheets kind of agenda, you know, back years ago, which, you know, some folks may remember that. Is, you know, go find the seller who hasn't put their asset in the marketplace, because you can convince them that, you know, 65% of whatever number you make up is the right value. And I'm going to pick on the wholesalers of the world. You're the same people, right? You have no real idea of what replacement cost is. You have no real idea. I mean, most times you have no real idea what it takes to improve the property. You know, not to say that all wholesalers are like that, but there's this growing thing of national wholesaling that's problematic. But then there's this other idea where I'm an investor. Look at me. I've got, you know, I beat my chest. I've got X amount of dollars, and so I want assets that aren't in the MLS or, or, off market or whatever, as if that's the better deal. How is that possible? Look, you and I have bought and sold more assets off market than most people will ever see in their career. I know I personally have bought and sold more assets off market than most people will ever see in their lifetimes. And it has nothing to do with a better price. And I used to tell people that would get on the phone trying to trade with us. It's not Costco just because it's off market. It's just, private solicitation. So don't be afraid of looking at stuff that's on the MLS. Don't be afraid of looking at stuff that's on, whatever, Craigslist. Wherever you source the product from is where you source it. I mean, it's like saying, hey, I found this, brand new 1965 Corvette on Amazon, but shoot, I can't pay $10 for it because that's not a good enough deal. Well, if it's the good deal, then it's the good deal. So, don't get lost in the wrong idea there. I can't stand that, right?
Okay.
So I think, one of the, we talked about a lot of the issues that a faraway investor has, without advertising ourselves, but just pointing it out just for the sake of our own time. But, I think we've came up with a pretty good idea of how to, attract, deal with, and potentially deploy different types of investors into real estate assets, both real property and maybe, loan positions that provide some adequate returns in some of this lower bandwidth stuff. And it's more complicated than we have any more time to deal with, but they can get a hold of you, they can get a hold of me.
Yep.
We're happy to have these conversations with people.
So anytime people watching this on YouTube, just simply ask a question inside of the YouTube page. I don't know. I'm supposed to ask you to like the page, right?
No, you're supposed to say. So that was your moment where you go like, subscribe, like.
Yeah,
there.
that's right. I have to do that.
But
Yeah, but I don't know how to
right.
put anything on the page. But it's Steve at Modern Asset Management. It's all spelled out .com.
If you guys wait long enough,
yeah.
he's going to be on TikTok.
Yeah. Oh, there I am. I'm going to be on TikTok. I don't think I'm going to live long enough to be on TikTok.
That's fair.
So I think we're, but
TikTok,
anyway.
the only thing TikToking is the bodily clock, right?
Yeah. So that's so we did an hour and 15 minutes on this. I'm gonna send this out to our little posse or tribe of investors that we've got, and get people's feedback and ideas. And it's time for me to narrow my directions instead of being so scattered. And when it comes to it comes down to the right team.
We're getting a lot more focused. You and I are being a lot more serious about what we're talking about. We're narrowing the broad range. So you do this particular call takes place when, and how would a third party get on this call?
Oh, how would people join this going forward? Well, so to hear this, I'm going to send this out to the Meetup link group. We'll send this out to the other sections of list that we have. But you mean to get on next time? You go find us on. You go find Steve Hodgdon, Hodgdon, on YouTube, and. I'm supposed to be he's pointing. What am I supposed to do? Oh, I'm supposed to
I'm pointing at you.
Oh, okay.
It just looked weird.
Oh, it just looked weird.
Go back to my shoulders.
Yeah, I'll go ask one of my children for help with putting some banner on this with a phone number.
Yeah. But just for the record, so you host this once a month.
Yeah.
You and I co-host a distressed asset mastermind group that has a consortium of investors around the U.S. every 2 weeks. Membership is open for folks that want to apply. We're looking for some more people to expand the tribe in. We want to. You and I talk enough. We're not trying to talk to each other. We're trying to talk to some other folks and get some more.
So if you're an active investor, we want you to participate. We want you to be want you to bring ideas and experiences and deals, and we've got people that are looking to do what I'm trying to do. They're trying to build prudent, reliable returns, and not have to pick up a hammer. So so there's a part in this for everybody. So if you're really good with a hammer and you know what you got, well, then you're part of this tribe too. So
Yeah, good point. If you're a local vendor, join. Let's hook you up with some people.
Yep.
Right.
All right, good deal. So I want to say thanks to the two guys that stuck it out to the end, and like I said, I'll go send this posting up, and then you and I will circle up the next day or two and get to work. All right.
Let's do it.
Okay.
I like it.
All right.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody.
All right. Okay. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.